just tell us a little bit about your career up to this point?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me here this morning. As Anne said, I was a student here at Glasgow many years ago, studying history of art. I had originally started out thinking I was going to do joint honours in English literature and history of art, but sort of fate intervened and it ended up being single honours in art history. And it was an amazing time for me. I mean, it's your 4 years at university are really quite incredible, and I do look back on those years as such an amazing time. I was the first within my immediate family to come to university, and I knew from the start I was applying for art history because I knew I wanted to work in the creative industries, especially the visual arts. And talking to my mum, you know, and sort of saying, well, I think I want to do this, she gave me the best bit of advice ever, which was, well, do what you love because you're going to have to do it every single day. And so I thought, well, I'll try this and see how it goes. While I was a student here, I basically volunteered at every museum in the city. So I did a spell at Kelvin Grove, at St Mungo's, at the Burrell Collection, Scotland Street School, and even here at the Hunterian. And it was all just experience in working with the actual objects. And this is something really vital to stress because, you know, now sort of jumping forward where I'm looking to hire people, the first thing I want to really see is, do they have experience with handling artworks? And it doesn't need to be you know, a massive, you know, important job. It's as much as just volunteering for a couple of weeks or on a set project where you've had that sort of direct one-on-one sort of handling experience. So I did that, and I knew that I, in completing my degree, wanted to continue further within the museum sector. And so Leicester was a very obvious choice to try and advance that. And it was, I won't lie about it, it was a really intense period. I went straight from graduating here in Glasgow, so finished up, you know, May, June, and then started at Leicester in September, October. And it was very intensive, but there is not a day goes by that I don't draw on those skills that I learned in that master's course. It really was a sort of foundation for entering into museum practice and curating. So from Leicester, I was sort of finishing up, getting ready to do my dissertation, and everyone was looking at jobs and applying for internships and fellowships and actual positions. And I saw this listing for the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and it was working with the photographs collection. Now, my degree in Glasgow had been primarily 19th century art, but within that there was a course on the history of photography. And in a way, fate again had sort of intervened because the course was only available every 3 or 4 years. And so the timing was such that it just kind of coincided while I was there. And in all my experience in volunteering around the museums in Glasgow, that was the one part of my degree that I didn't have the sort of the real physical hands-on experience of working with photographs. So that was my motivation in applying for the Getty internship. That, and it was Los Angeles. I mean, it was, you know. But I also thought, well, gosh, it's so out there and it's so far away. I just don't know if I'll ever, you know, get it. And again, I remember my mum giving me another good piece of advice, and she was like, well, you won't know if you don't try. And so I kind of got over my fears of rejection and applied for that. And around Easter time got the news that I was indeed successful in my application and that I would be then starting in September. And so I went out to Los Angeles thinking that it was only going to be a 9-month internship, and I was going to make the most of it and also really see if photographs were the art objects that I wanted to work with on a day-to-day basis. There was no doubt, I knew I wanted to work in museums, but the question was whether I wanted to focus on photography. And within, you know, the first few weeks, I just completely knew that this was it, this was my career course. And so one thing led to another. At the end of the 9-month internship, I had these amazing experiences, met amazing people and learned so much. And I was able to sort of stay on through the summer. They extended my contract for a few months. And I was working on, of all things, cataloguing the Hill and Adamson collection. So for those of you in art history and for those of you who've studied photography, Hill and Adamson were pioneering photographers based in Edinburgh in 1843 to 1847. So there was a sort of joke in the department that this was taking Coles to Newcastle, because here they were having me, the Scottish person, work on this Scottish collection in Los Angeles. And just before the end of the summer and before concluding this project, one of my colleagues decided that she was actually going to return to teaching. And so this position opened up within the department. And I had to apply like everybody else, but I was lucky in that then I was able to stay on. And so what started out as a 9-month internship ended up being 18 years, and which I can say I never planned for that. I mean, when I went out, I had one suitcase, and that was it. When I came back to Scotland in 2013, I had a husband, a daughter, and a lot more than one suitcase. Lots of books sort of in boxes. So it was, I think the lesson there was to be prepared for the unexpected, to work hard, and when fate intervenes, be ready. Don't be afraid. It was a tremendous learning experience for me being in Los Angeles for all kinds of reasons. But the collection at the Getty is about 120,000 photographs that spans the history of photography. So I was learning on the job, and the reason I stayed there as long as I did was that there was always a challenge there. It never got boring, and I always felt that I was always being challenged in the right ways to learn, to broaden my knowledge. But when the job came up at the National Galleries of Scotland, it just felt that this was an opportunity of a lifetime, and to come back home and essentially live my professional life back in Scotland, because I had left when I was so young and had just finished my studies that I didn't feel like I'd really gotten to be an adult. And so there was that sort of challenge there of coming back. But the collection at the National Galleries of Scotland, which is housed at the National Portrait Gallery, is really phenomenal. It's to date it's about 55,000 objects, and again it's from sort of 1840s to the present day, so historical overview. My title is a little strange, perhaps, International Photography Curator. For me, it sounded a bit like Austin Powers, where I just sort of thought, well, that's a bit sort of bizarre. But there's a very good reason for it, and that is the collection is housed at the Portrait Gallery, but the photography collection is not limited to portraiture, and it's not limited to Scottish art. So it really is covering the history of photography, and my title is somewhat a kind of a clue to that. When I started, it was just me within the division, and I was responsible for the exhibitions and publications that came out under National Galleries of Scotland. There's now a colleague that works with me, and we do actually have a position open at the moment too. So you may already have seen that. It's on our website. So it's a growing department, both in terms of the photographs themselves and also in terms of the staff required to work with the collection. And but it's essentially doing the same job that I was doing and that I was trained for all the way back in Leicester. So again, back to my point, you know, the skill set that I learned there on top of the formal education of the history of photography that I learned here are the two things that I draw in, day out.
I would make the assumption then from what you're saying is that the Masters in Museum Studies was a necessity to move into it for you. Do you still think that would stand correct for current students?
I do. I think that, as you mentioned in your previous talk, it's highly competitive as a field. And if anything, there's a lot of pressure these days to have a PhD and not just your master's. And I don't say that to put you off. I just say it's, depending on the jobs that you're going for, the areas that you're specialising in, there will be a lot of people out there going after those same positions. But everybody is unique in what they bring to a job and what skill set they have. So, don't let that put you off. I would say go out and get as much experience as you can, but know that if you really want to proceed within this career, and certainly if you are thinking about curation, then a master's really would give you that edge. And then if you even decide to take it further with a PhD, then for sure. But I would come back and stress that, again, you need that hands-on experience as well. So don't feel that you need to sort of do it boom, boom, boom. It may be that you take an opportunity to find out what other jobs there are within the museums and galleries field. There's a whole raft of colleagues who all come from sort of arts background, arts and humanities. Whether it's in the registrar's office, where a colleague has an archaeology degree, or whether it's in the art handling department, so the people that are actually mounting the artworks to the wall. The majority of them are artists and of their own right. So it is a field that draws a lot of people from different backgrounds with different skills. And they are, for the most part, transferable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Annie, so everybody got a question that they'd like to ask?
That's a really good question. So the sort of typical day for me is variety. So this week, let's just give you a sort of insight. On Monday, I was in the office and was sort of working on programmes for the coming years, but got pulled into last-minute meetings to do with budgets. So there's that sort of administrative side of things. On Tuesday, yesterday, I was actually through here in Glasgow at a studio visit with a photographer, and then I was meeting with a donor to the collection and facilitating a gift of photographs to the National Galleries of Scotland. And then today I'm here. I head back through to Edinburgh this afternoon, and I'm doing another talk there on an exhibition I curated last year, the work of Graham McIndoe, which was a very challenging exhibition dealing with the subject of heroin addiction, as seen from his own perspective. He himself was the addict. So that sort of sense of variety is actually quite commonplace. It is, for the most part, a sedentary job. You are sort of sitting either at a desk or working in the storeroom. And there's, like any sort of job in the modern world, there's a hell of a lot of emails and meetings that you must attend. But I try and make sure that each day I'm engaging with the actual art. So whether that's doing a little bit of research, whether that's following up on cataloguing or thinking about the next exhibitions or publication.
Well, a lot of variety.
Yeah.
A lot of skill sets that you're jumping between.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that would be typical for anybody in your team to be jumping around sort of roles and skill sets?
I think so, to a certain degree. Obviously, the collection I'm responsible for, photographs, are, they're much more portable and compact in their storage. If I were dealing with 18th century sculpture, I wouldn't be just nipping upstairs into the storeroom kind of thing. So there's a slight difference in accessibility just with our collection. But the role of a curator is indeed, you have to be able to pursue a line of inquiry and do your research, but then you also have to be able to communicate that to an audience. And the audience could be a room full of specialists, or it could be the public. So to be able to know who you're talking to and pitch it, to be very clear in your communication skills, to be good at your writing skills, these are all prerequisites for the job, regardless of what collection area.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else got a question?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if I start with the things that maybe, or the thing I wish I had done, that would probably actually be practical photography. So I'm not a photographer, and I think that and I guess it's not too late, I can still sort of, learn that skill to give me that better understanding and insight into the practice, and to have, so perhaps to have done that, and to have dabbled more and get a sense of what is required. And then, other things that I think have contributed, it's joining societies and, becoming members of other clubs or associations, because that not only helps you learn about your profession, but it's a wonderful networking area as well. And you will be surprised how small a field it is and how many people know one another. And it's not even 6 degrees of separation in many cases. And that is an opportunity just waiting for, to be explored. So, I would say join as many clubs, societies, associations as you can. Go to public lectures and talks. Go up and meet people, introduce yourself. Really see it as an opportunity to connect face to face, which really is worth stressing in this day and age, because so much of our social interaction is through social media, and so there's that buffer of it being sort of online. And that is a valid form too, but there's something to be said for actually coming up, and it can just be saying to someone, I really enjoyed your talk. Are you doing any more research on this subject? Are you looking for any help? Or, it can be very natural just to sort of, speak to people, although I appreciate it may be a bit of a leap to make from the audience to then approaching someone, but, they're just people. So
I think that's really good advice. Okay, there was another question there. It was the same question. Okay, anyone else? There's a couple of things that you mentioned when you were speaking, Annie, that I'd maybe like to take you back to. So getting that first internship, the graduate internship at the Getty Museum, what was it, do you think, that they liked about you? Why did they choose you?
Well, I think it was the fact that I had studied history of photography at Glasgow, because at that particular moment, back in the mid-90s, there were very few universities that were teaching the history of photography. So the formal education was definitely something that they tapped into. But then it was also the fact that I did have this hands-on experience, that I had volunteered in a number of museums. And I had to, in fact, there's a funny story, because I had an interview on the phone, only I was so green, I didn't realise I was being interviewed.
So you're having a conversation.
So, and I remember I was home for Easter holidays, I was home from Leicester, and I was upstairs in my parents' house, and the phone rang, and it was my younger sister that answered it. And it's, typical younger sister, she's screaming up the stairs, Annie, it's the Getty on the phone! And, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm sort of running down the stairs, trying to sound composed and go, hello, like my voice is all over the place. And talking to the associate curator of photographs at the time, Judy Keller, and she was just asking me a bunch of questions, and we were just talking about photography, and she was asking me who I, was inspired by, and who I was, interested in, and but it wasn't until we sort of hung up that I realised, oh, that was an interview, which may have been a blessing because, I mean, I was nervous enough, but I probably would have been much more nervous had I sort of anticipated it. But I found out years later that I actually was their second choice. And this was the person that they were they'd ranked them, because funny enough, I ultimately became in charge of the internship program within the department. And you would have your top 3 candidates, and you would basically, offer it to the first one. And if they said no, or if something, else came up, you would then sort of go down the list. And I remember thinking, gosh, I reflected back on what my mum had said, which is, well, you don't know unless you try. And, and that idea that fate sort of works in a whole number of ways. So yeah, that's...
And I think that's an interesting question, and I think it still stands true, and I've heard that from lots of the speakers over today and yesterday. It's about understanding your cultural field, so... in television, it's watch television. If you get asked, what TV do you like? Oh, I like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you were asked a question like that, so who's your inspiration?
Yeah.
So you need to be going to shows, you need to be visiting exhibitions.
Absolutely.
And really understanding what's out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you're constantly having to do your homework. And I still do my homework. I'm still travelling, looking at exhibitions, reading articles, looking at books that have come out, meeting with people, having portfolio reviews. It's just, it never ends.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. It's not, I don't mean it never ends. It's sort of, you're constantly, the opportunity to grow and to learn and to bring that into your practice and your profession is really paramount.
I also want to, you've said it again, I haven't noted it down here, but you've said it again just now about luck, about being lucky. And I hear that a lot from people that work in sort of like highly competitive jobs, but it's not something that you can do or depend on or create for yourself. So when you take the luck out of the equation, what else is left that you have control over?
Well, I think it's hard work. I mean, you have to work at it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you know that because you're doing your degrees. So you can't, just because you're here doesn't mean that Glasgow's going to award you a degree. You have to work at it. And that continues in the sort of the world outside at large. And I think it's, I think a lot of it is just being open to situations and also being prepared for change. Things, you can't be so fixed in what you want to see happen because you're only going to get disappointed that way. It's good to have a plan, it's good to work towards goals, but you have to be flexible enough to let these changes kind of perhaps steer you or influence you and take you on different directions. And I think I still carry that with me in my job because, exhibitions that we've been working on may get cancelled or may not happen. Funding may get pulled out, or, there's just a whole number of factors that could account for it. And as disappointed as I may be, I sort of tell myself, well, there's something else. We'll just do something else. So it's a matter of just being able to sort of know yourself well enough to know where your strengths are, what it is that you want to do, but be open to what the universe has to teach you, basically, and just sort of take it from there, really.
So specifically then, thinking about what you said, it was lucky that your colleague, after you were doing the graduate internship, was a female, she?
Yeah, she.
And she was going off to teaching. I was lucky. But it's not really. It's lucky that you were happened to be there and you heard that this situation. But it wasn't luck that got you the job, I'm sure.
No, because I had applied myself in that time, and so I had demonstrated that I could take on the job and that I had the skill sets, and so it's it's absolutely essential that you bring it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't afford to be lazy. That's really what it comes down to. You've really got to work hard, because again, it is so competitive out there. But it's just to, I think, be open.
And that would apply for every single opportunity that any of the students might find themselves in, I'm sure, like volunteering or
Absolutely.
anything like that.
I mean, I appreciate that I was living at home while I was a student here, and so I didn't have the same overheads in terms of bills that others may have. So I could take on a lot of these volunteering roles, and that is a big thing in the industry to do. There's a lot of discussion around that, this idea of free labour.
Yeah.
But I had a job too. I mean, I worked front of house for the Theatre Royal in Glasgow, and so I was still involved in the arts in some capacity, and it influenced me in all areas of my life. And so you do have those choices. You know, you can decide what's going to be important to you. And so as much as I would have loved to have lived in a flat with my friends in the West End, I couldn't afford it. That's why I was staying at home, because I just couldn't afford it. But then it meant I had a certain degree of financial freedom, where I could then take on volunteer roles while still having a paid job. But it was just it was finding that balance, you know. And everyone's different, and you know it's but I think it's just keep looking and keep pushing.
A couple of things I'd like to just have jotted down when Annie was speaking that I just want to let you know about when it's in my mind to say it. The Hunterian, so she mentioned, so you all know that we have the Hunterian, obviously. You walk past it. So we have the Hunterian collection here. So do you know that the Hunterian Museum so they recruit muses every year. So I'm not quite sure how they publicise those at the minute, but if you go into the Hunterian and ask anybody in there, they'll be able to tell you where those are advertised through. The other thing is that the archives department, so you know we have an archives department. Okay, so the university has a massive archive because obviously we're such an historical institution as well as an educational institution, we have a massive archive which is all stored at the minute down in, I can't remember the name of the street. Thursday Street, thank you, Karen. So we have a big collection there as well. So where you were talking about getting the chance to actually handle things, so the archives, they are going to be recruiting work experience people as of next year. So keep an eye out for that. Because it's unpaid, we won't be advertising it through the Career Service website, but I will put it out through the Mega. So do you all get emails through the Mega? So that's where I'll be publicising that through whenever that all comes to fruition. And those are definitely things that will give you exactly what Annie's describing, the experience of, you know, actually touching, handling content, so that it's a skill that you've got, it's a bit of experience that you've got. So keep an eye out for those. So that said, anything else you would like to ask?
It varies depending on your area of specialism, and so for me with photography and it being international, it is then anywhere in the world, and that has been an amazing facet of the job. So in the 20 odd years I've been doing this, I've basically travelled to Australia, Japan, all of Europe, North America. It's been pretty phenomenal. Sometimes it's to do my own research, and other times you're a courier for artworks that are being loaned to other institutions, and that's exciting. It sounds way more glamorous than it is, because a lot of it is waiting around in hangars at airports at like 4 o'clock in the morning and it's freezing out. But it is an opportunity to see the world and to see how other museums and galleries operate in different countries. There's also a degree of local travel as well, particularly with my job at the National Galleries of Scotland. My remit is Scotland, and so there is a sort of, travelling up and down. But just last week it was Photo London, a big photo fair that took place at Somerset House, so I was down there for that. So there's it depends, but I have colleagues who are maybe specialised in Scottish portraiture, and their focus and their travel is much more domestic. But then my colleagues that work with the contemporary collections, they're travelling all over the world too. So it's something to think about. If you are not big on travel, then really do give thought to it, because it is essentially a kind of requirement that you would do this, and it's a good part of the job, though, I do say.
So if you're interested in the travel aspect of it, what about things like art fairs? How can students get involved in things like that are both handling and can be international?
Well, I think so art fairs are an opportunity for galleries from all over the world that come together in one particular venue for a limited period of time. So if there are local galleries here or in your hometown, and you know that they are sort of participating, or even if you just pop in and ask them if they are and they need help, there is a kind of sense of, there is a need for kind of hands-on on the ground there. So if you know that there's a big photo fair happening in your hometown, you might get in touch and sort of say, do you need any help? Because there is a kind of temporary crew that comes in, whether it's installing, whether it's fronting the booths, or whether it's just distributing information. But I would say the easiest route is probably the galleries themselves. If you've got a particular language skill, if you're fluent in a language and the gallery is going to Paris for Paris Photo, for example, then you want to play that up. I'm fluent in French. That's a big thing that you see, and I've talked to various colleagues over the years, and you'll see them. Oh, what are you doing here? Oh, well, they needed someone that spoke German, and so that's why.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of information, that seems like such a specific piece of information that a particular gallery in a particular town is going to a particular art fair at a particular time.
Yeah.
But if you were following that gallery on Twitter, you would know that. And you might see that on Twitter, and you might tweet back and say, I see that you're going to wherever, is there anything? And would that be okay to do that?
I think so. I have to say, my personal thing is I'm less open to people reaching out across social media. I'd much rather you sent me a personal email, and that we have the conversation that way, or drop a letter or pop in and leave a note. But that's just how I am at the National Galleries. But people are different. But I think that you're absolutely right. The key is is to do your homework, is to really get to know the different galleries, what their habits are, what the shows they do, the type of artists they're putting on and representing, and it's about making those contacts that lead to relationships that may then lead to opportunities and jobs. So it can be a bit of a slow burn, but it's very rewarding, I think. And even if it doesn't lead to an opportunity, well, you're broadening your own knowledge and your own sort of skill set in communicating and liaising with these people.
It was like Amanda McLeod. So she's an opera singer. She came in and spoke yesterday to the music students, and it's what she said. It's like your hobby and it's your job.
Yeah.
So it's like just this complete world within itself, which I thought was quite a nice way to put it. Okay. Any final questions? Yeah.
I was just going to ask. I know you kind of covered bits of this already. But if you were to interview one of us, what sort of things would you specifically enjoy to see, and what sort of regular slip-ups do you see if you're interviewing someone maybe you've got our level or even?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And so the biggest area I would say to focus on in preparing for any sort of interview is prepare. Do run-throughs, practice with your friends. It's a given that that you may be nervous. I mean, some people are not. And, for interviewers sitting on the other side of the table, they're aware of that. But if you've practiced, if you've really rehearsed, the nerves won't be as much an obstacle for you, and you'll be able to get yourself across and what it is that you have to offer in a much better way. Something Anne said earlier, where if you're looking at job postings, and there is that requirements listed, you really want to include that in your answer and your application back. It's not parroting what's been said, but it's basically picking up on that vocabulary and saying, yes, look, I've got this, because we get hundreds of applications, and so we are scanning through and we're looking, do they even meet the requirements, and are they basically paying attention to what we've said that we need? And so that's the first thing, even in your application, is really pay attention to that and spend time on it. And if there's the room and the opportunity for a cover letter, take time on that too. It's not enough just to have a 1 sentence, 2 sentence, like, well, here's my application. You have to think of it, this is your moment to sort of stand out from everybody else and to get the attention of the employer, and to do it in a way that's authentic and true to yourself. But you've been given, this space to do it, so don't let it pass up. And then in the actual interview itself, I think it's, just try and be yourself. And if you've got your good CV, a solid CV together, you've got a good cover letter, like I say, even if you're nervous, that is going to come through, and it really is an opportunity to see. And you also have to remember, it's a two-way thing. You're interviewing the employer too, and it's the same with volunteering or internships. It's a chance for you to see, is this the career I want? Is this going to sustain me? Am I going to be interested in this 5 years from now? Is it going to pay me enough as a career? Like, it's a chance for you to try it on. You have to see it that way too, that it's not just, I need this, I want to do it, let me, get a foot in the door type of thing. You're saying, well, wait a minute, are you deserving of me? I think you have to sort of see it as a two-way street. And the same for the interview then. It's so to think about questions. There's nothing worse when it gets to the end of an interview and you're sort of said, right, well, do you have any questions for us? And the answer is no. And even if maybe all of your prepared questions have been answered in the course of the conversation, try and think of something, because if this is a place that you're going to work at, it's going to be a huge commitment on everyone's part. So that is your moment to really exhaust all possibilities and know yourself that it's the right fit if the offer then is made to you.
A nice question, I think, to ask at the end of an interview is to say to your interviewer, what is it you like about working here?
Yeah.
And then that gets them talking about themselves, and everybody loves talking about themselves.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I want to pick up on that you just said. So whenever you're doing these CVs or cover letters, or you're reaching out in any way through networking, or you get invited for an interview, you're not on your own. There's loads of support available. So if you go onto the Career Service website, you'll see a kind of button that says make an appointment. You can make an appointment to come and see me, and I can look at your CV, I can give you feedback in your cover letters. You can come in for a practice interview for 40 minutes where we will actually, so you might say, well, I've applied to this job or this volunteering role, this is how far I've got invited for a telephone interview or a meeting, go ahead and help me prepare for it, and we'll help you prepare specifically for that. So don't feel as if any of this job strategy, job searching, any of that, you're on your own with it, because you can certainly come and make an appointment, see me, and I will give you a hand with it as well. Okay, so this is almost up to our time. Has anybody got any final questions that they'd like to ask? One more over here.
It was a paid internship, yes. So no, there was no way I could have lived in LA without it being paid. So yeah, that was the only way possible. And it was, I was living very frugally as well. I mean, Los Angeles is a very expensive city, and I, was room sharing and, was walking or taking public transport to work. In fact, I was living in LA for 5 years before I actually got a car, so it was. But again, those were sacrifices and choices that I willingly made because there was so much other areas of interest that I was pursuing that was really fulfilling. But I will say, if you're going into the arts thinking you're going to make mega bucks, you might want to reconsider right now. It's not, that is not really the reality. And not to say that you shouldn't get paid what you're worth and that we shouldn't all get, sort of proper remuneration. But there are other careers out there with higher salaries attached to it. So again, it comes back to almost, again, what my mum told me, do it because you love it, because you're going to do it every single day.
And that's an interesting additional point to make. I get contacted all the time by big corporate organisations, and they love it, absolutely love it, whenever arts students make an application to them, and they're forever saying to me, can I get in front of art students? And I say, well, I can organise it. They may not come because they may not be interested in you, but just to point that out to you, so don't not think about those big corporate organisations and the graduate schemes that the business students and the accountancy students and all the other students are going for. Don't discount them because you think they're not interested in you. Absolutely fine. I'm not saying you should you should all go and work for them, but discount them because you're not interested in the job, you're not interested in the company, you're not interested in the that type of corporate organisation. But don't discount it because you think it's not a possibility for you, or because they're not interested in you, because it's actually quite the converse. They really love to see you guys making applications to them. So go forth and be accountants. No, I joke.
Well, but one of my good friends who studied history of art here at Glasgow, she indeed went on that sort of path and was working for big international corporations in London within their marketing department, because her communication skills and her visual skills, her ability to engage in visual art was absolutely essential for that marketing job. So it's absolutely a valid point.
Yeah, and bringing a creative perspective as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's us up to our hour. Thank you hugely, Annie. That was this is one of the occupational hazards of being a careers advisor. You talk to so many people that have got these wonderful jobs that you're like, okay, that's it, I'm retraining, that's it, I'm going off and I'm going to do something else. But it's really, really interesting to hear your perspective. Thank you very, very much for giving up your time for the students.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.